What are dreams made up of? When we're in the dream, we'll make all sorts of distinctions. If we were asked that question in a dream, you might say, well, look, there's a mountain and there's my mother. The mountain is inert, my mother is sentient. My mother's made up of flesh and blood and bone. That mountain is just rock. When we wake up from the dream, we say it was all just a dream. And what's the dream made up of? Well, even if you're a materialist, it's kind of hard to see how a dream is made up of physical elements, just as it's quite hard to see how a thought, an idea, is made up of physical elements. So we'll just settle for saying that the dream is of the same nature as thought. It's insubstantial. And so we get this statement here that consciousness is pure experiencing, because that's what we can say about a dream. It is experiencing. It is this pure experiencing alone that shines as the earth, etc., though in truth it is nothing but space or void, which shines as the created world. So that's quite a good description of dream, isn't it? Now recently we've been looking into the distinction between dream and waking, and it's one of these discriminations that we make. So the waking world is of the same nature as dream. It's all mind created. We've got notions of physicality and all the rest of it, but we've looked into this and we can see how it all exists within the mind. And what's the mind? Well, we're just going to call it consciousness. Because when we say mind, we might start thinking of brain. And a brain's a material thing. And the absurdity of assuming that the universe is material has been explored before. Our whole reality is notional. This awareness or experiencing appears to be impossible to overcome at times, and at times it seems to be capable of being put to an end. In fact, it is not possible to put an end to it, because pure experiencing remains even after all the other things have been put to an end. We've been looking at the discrimination between waking and dreaming. It is all experiencing. Sometimes we think we wake up from the dream, but what we call the waking reality is no different in substance or essence from dream reality. And sometimes we think we're unconscious, sometimes we think we die, but consciousness carries on. Experiencing carries on. Not the experience necessarily that relates to a particular identity, just the experiencing of consciousness, or just consciousness and experiencing. There's only this stream of experiencing. It doesn't sound like much perhaps, but it's the whole cosmic creative process. It's infinite creativity tumbling along moment to moment. It is like you're going from the east to the west. Now you know the east and now you know the west, but the experience of knowing remains the same. It's this experience of knowing which is the key thing. It doesn't matter what you know, the knowing is the same. Whatever you think of intently for a considerable time, that you experience, or you rest in peace and experience that peace. So whatever you think of intently for a considerable time, there are possible interpretations here, but given the context, I'm going to suggest that we take this as something which motivates us, to activity or action. Or you don't actually go into action, you just rest in peace and be at peace. This fits in with the context and with the following sentence. You go from the east to the west and know these. Another does not go but stays in one place and still knows these. So if you think intently about doing something, then you go from the east to the west, or whatever it is you do, and you know that this is what you're doing. This is how you know it, by doing it. But maybe you don't. Maybe you rest in peace. Another does not go but stays in one place and still knows these. In other words, the differences here between doing something and thinking about doing something. The infinite consciousness, being non-moving, remains the same whether it is thus experienced or thought of. It's the knowing which stays the same. So we can either do something or think about doing something. But it's that knowing, it's that awareness of doing something or awareness of thinking about doing something which is the same. Now what's happening here is the distinction or the discrimination we make between reality and imagination. We say that imagination is not real and reality is what is actually happening out there, what you actually do. And just as we get over the discrimination between dreaming and being awake, we're now looking into the discrimination between reality and imagination. Because the actual knowing, the awareness is the same in each case. Whether you do something or you think about doing something, it's the same awareness. Whether you walk east and west or think about walking east and west, they both arise in the same awareness, the same knowing. Both experiences arise and both experiences cease. So it doesn't matter whether it's a real experience, what we call a real experience, or an imaginary experience. They both arise in awareness. When the wish arises in one, I shall go from the south to the north. Both these arise in the non-moving consciousness. But when such a wish does not arise, the directions north and south do not exist. They're not in awareness. It's only when something comes into awareness that it truly exists. We can have the notion of east and west, but only when they come into awareness. When the consciousness thinks, may I become a city in the sky, or may I become an animal on earth, these two come into being. When that notion is not there, they cease. To others, the world is something else. So the city in the sky relates to the imagination, and an animal on earth is something real. Again, they both arise in awareness, and we're not interested in dismissing something because it's imaginary, or even dismissing something because it's apparently real. They both arise in awareness, in consciousness, in knowing. And to others the world is something else. And that world could be any bundle of notions that they've turned their awareness to. Some people believe in flying saucers, some people believe in evolution, some people believe in the divine plan, some people believe in getting rich. These are some of the notions which constitute the reality for many people.